Hi everyone. So I've been doing some machine learning lately, and I wanted to walk you guys through how to set up machine learning on AWS. So as you can see, I have a Jupyter notebook over here running, and even though it's being served through localhost, it's actually going over to the EC2 instance, in this case a C4 type. But we could very well configure it to be a GPU instance as well. So I'm going to show you guys how to set up and secure Jupyter notebooks on AWS using spot instances. So not only are they cheaper, but they're more efficient. And along with that, I'm going to show you guys how to launch them programmatically so you don't have to repeatedly use the AWS console, I guess. And if I switch over to the terminal, so this is basically what we're going to end up setting up. Over here is the actual terminal, so I can run commands in here. And this is the Jupyter notebook running right here. And then over here is something called HTOP, which lets me monitor, in this case, the CPU. So this is a 2 CPU instance, RAM memory, other stats, and helpful stuff like that. And then we're also going to configure our notebook to use a private GitHub repository anywhere that you want to share your notebooks to. All right, let me switch over to the screencast and show you how it's done. Great, so I have my AWS dashboard open here, and we're going to go ahead to Services and then EC2. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how to actually set up manually through the dashboard our very first instance. And on this instance, we're actually going to set up things like certificates, GitHub, and that kind of stuff. And that's going to be a one-time process. In the future, after that, I'm going to show you how to programmatically, using the AWS CLI, basically launch instances so you don't have to use the AWS dashboard. So there's a couple of things I've already done. The first thing is security groups. If I go in here, I've created a new security groups called My Instance, where the only rule I have is that inbound traffic for SSH on port 22 for source of my IP address is allowed. And then outbound is pretty much just the generic default. The second thing I've already done is that I already have a one of my key pairs added, which you can do, and then download the security certificate. For this will basically let you SSH into your instances. So for the remainder of the tutorial, we're going to be using something called spot instances. Now, spot instances basically let you bid on unused instances, so they end up costing less, and everyone's happy. So let's go ahead and create a new spot instance. And so we need to create a request type, and the target capacity is going to be 1. And I find that for the first step, where we're just going to be bootstrapping and getting this thing ready, we can go ahead and use the C4 large. And if you click on pricing history, this basically lets us know that right now, I'm just going to go copy this price. So as you can see, normally it costs 10 cents, but right now it's like 0.2 cents. So you save about 8 cents an hour if we end up doing this. So I'm going to remember that and close out. So we need a default image that's going to be launched on our instance. In this case, we're going to go to Community AMIs and type in Deep Learning. Click on Search. Oh, what happened there? Didn't want to search it. Deep Learning. And as of right now, if you go to the second page, there should be a Deep Learning Linux AMI. So Deep Learning AMI Linux, and you can notice the ID over here. So we're going to select this, and instance type, I guess I didn't choose it, but we're going to select a C4 large, do that. Network stuff seems fine, default, everything else is good. Security groups, go ahead and click on My Instance, which I just showed you. Key pair is MacBook Pro, which I already showed you. So let me see if there's anything else. The maximum price, since we already saw what the maximum price is, we can go ahead and make it point to, let's see what the pricing history is showing us. 0.287. 0.287. So that's the maximum we're willing to pay. And everything else looks good. And we're going to go ahead and click on launch. So spot request successfully created. Go ahead and refresh it. Active. And alright, great. We have one instance now. And right now the status is pending. So I'm going to pause it until it's active. Alright, so the checks have passed and the instance is running. So I've created a GitHub repository called ML Setup on my account where I have a couple of shell scripts that we'll be using to set up our instances and just get started. So if I go ahead and switch over to terminal, I'm in the deep learning repository, and over here I've gone ahead and cloned the ML Setup GitHub repo. So if I take a look at ssh.sh, so I've gone ahead and replaced the private key variable with my private key, which was downloaded from the AWS dashboard. So let's go ahead and make sure that you've done your shell script is executable by doing basically chmod plus executable and then star.sh. So this will make all your executables executable basically. And so let's go ahead and do ssh.sh. So you go ahead and click yes. Alright, so we've actually connected to our instance. So I'm just going to go ahead and make the font a little bit smaller and make the window larger for you guys. Alright, so let's go ahead and update everything on our machine. So this could take a little bit. I'll be right back when this is done updating. That took about 5 minutes, but I'm back and you should say completed after the update's done. Now we're going to go ahead and install some packages that are going to end up being really helpful for us. So one of them is called tmux and the other one is called htop. So tmux will allow us to basically run Windows and have panes and stuff like that, and htop gives us nice looking stats for our Linux machine. So now that that's done, we need to basically get SSL certificates working so we can securely communicate with the server. So we're going to create a new directory called SSL, and I'm going to go into that, and these commands will be provided to you, but we're going to go ahead and run a command that will place, it went ahead and created a .key and a .pem file. So next thing we need to do is secure our future Jupyter notebook with a password. So we're going to run the IPython command, and this might take a second or so. Okay, so the Python interpreter should show up, and we're going to go ahead and run this line without the space, so that okay, so it should be imported. So if I do pass wd and run the function, okay, so this is where I'm going to enter in my password for the Jupyter notebook. So it spits out this SHA-1. So you want to go ahead and copy this and paste it somewhere for yourself. Let's exit out of IPython. And now we have to edit basically the config file for IPython so we can add in that password. So this is where it's located. Run that and Vim should open up. Alright, so let's go all the way to the bottom of the page. So all the way, keep going. Okay, so when we've reached the bottom, we're going to go ahead and paste in some lines of Python. basically. Insert mode. Okay. So there's a couple of things we need to change within the strings. So the first things that we need to change is the notebook password. So the thing that the SHA hash that we basically just copied, go ahead and paste that guy in here without. Fix this. Wim is a lot of fun. And there's, I believe, one other thing that we need to do. So instead of Ubuntu, change this to, let's see, where are we located? So, yeah, it should be home EC2 user. Okay, got it. So if we go back to editing it, and it should be home EC2 user. Home, and then EC2 user. Since we're not on the Ubuntu image, EC2 user. Okay, that should be fine. And then close that. Okay, great. The next thing we have to do is get GitHub set up on our server, so we can basically pull down private repositories and things like that. So while in our machine, let's go ahead and basically generate an SSH key. This is what it would look like. You would go ahead and run it with your email address. And yep, that looks right. And so enter in a password. Enter it again. Cool, it does that. Now we have to basically look at the public key, because that's what GitHub requires. So I'm just catting it, and then we're going to go ahead and copy this and go on to your GitHub settings keys page and new SSH key, and you can call it whatever you want, and paste that thing in here and click add SSH key. But I've already gone ahead and done that. I have my AWS SSH key. The next thing that we have to do is test it out. So let's actually see if the Python stuff and the Jupyter Notebook stuff is working as we would expect. So we have to basically run source activate Python 3. They would change this if you wanted to run TensorFlow or MXNet. This would change according to the instructions in the beginning. And this basically sets up some environment stuff for us. Next, let's go ahead and run our Jupyter Notebook. This could take a second since it's the first time that it's running. So just be patient. So that took about a minute, but the Jupyter Notebook seems to be running. You can ignore the SSL errors that it might show up. So if you go back to our web browser and open a new tab, and the reason we have SSL activated is because we basically need, so the connection will be securely encrypted. So we're going to go to localhost, and in this case, if you use the script ssh.sh, then it should be 8157. And we should see your connection is not private. That's fine. Click on advanced, and then click on proceed to localhost, unsafe. And the reason I should note that it's saying that it's unsafe, because if you go ahead and click on the certificate, it says that the root certificate is not trusted. And this is true because we're not going through like a certificate authority to actually generate the SSL certificate. We're just using the fact that we have an end-to-end encrypted connection. So that's fine for our use case. Now we're going to go ahead and enter in the Jupyter password. And it should let us in to our Jupyter Notebook. There we go. So one important thing that we obviously want to do is use our GitHub, for instance, to pull down our notebooks. So in this case, I have a machine learning GitHub repository. So if we go back to terminal, I'm going to exit out of the Jupyter Notebook. So we're going to stop this. And So you want to go to your GitHub repository and click on clone download, and you want to clone it with the SSH basically aspect, because if you do it just by cloning it from the URL, that's not the way we've set up authentication in this particular case. So you want to copy that, and then you're going to do git clone, paste it in, and yes, you want to trust it. So it won't work for me because I was using another public key for that particular situation, but you should be able to then clone it and then have it on there. So we have all the tools we have necessary. So now basically, let me exit out of the SSH connection. So next thing we want to go ahead and do is go back to our EC2 management page, and then we're going to basically click on the instance that we were running on and have it selected, and then go to actions, and then image, and then create image. So while the reason we want to do this is we want to now take basically a snapshot of the volume that's connected to the instance and all the work that we just did with the certificates and GitHub and all that stuff. We wanted to basically save in that state, so we can just spin up a new instance and have that image be the root volume, so the next time we connect to it, all the stuff is still there, all the configuration and password and that kind of stuff that we've done. So image name, you can go ahead and call it Deep Learning Image, or whatever you want. You can have some description and all the other stuff that you want, and you're going to go ahead and click on create image. I've already gone ahead and done that, so if I click on images and then AMIs, we can see that my deep learning image, after it has been created, it should show up here, and then status should be available. This can take like 10-15 minutes in my experience. So now we've basically done all the configuration that we need to do, so we can actually go back to our instance and then go ahead and terminate it. We're going to want to do this because now we have taken an instance snapshot. We still have all the work that we just did with the certificates and all that stuff. So this will allow us to now, using basically the AWS CLI, launch exactly this kind of, all the work that we just did, this kind of an instance anytime that we want. And the way we're going to do that is use the scripts that I've provided. So if you just take a look at the scripts, the first thing that we have is called the spot request.sh. So if we look at that, it's just using the AWS EC2 command, specifically request spot instance. In this case, 28 cents is the spot price, and you can change this to what you want. One instance, it's going to be a one-time request, and launch specification is in a file called spotinstance.json. So let's go ahead and take a look at spotinstance.json. So I've gone ahead and replaced the information with my respective information. So the image ID is going to basically come from, if you go back to AWS and click on AMIs, the image ID is going to be basically this thing right here. So the 84E, and so on. The instance type, C4 large, I'm fine with that. You can go ahead and replace this with the G instances or the P instances, but then make sure to adjust your spot price accordingly. And so my key name is MBP, so that's what I have here, MBP. Security groups, so go ahead to security groups. My instance security groups is SGD3. SGD3. So this is just some stuff that from the GitHub repository, after you've cloned it, you can just edit out. And then so now what we're going to do is basically just run spot request.sh. So it's going to go ahead and create a spot request for us. Spot requests. So there's one that's active, and then if you click on instances, so it's initializing because I'm just filtering it on the instance state running, and so I'll be right back when the instance is done bootstrapping. So the status checks have passed. Let's go ahead back and switch over to the terminal. And we're going to go ahead and run ssh.sh again. Yes. You want to trust it. And if you do ls now on our SSH machine, we can see that the SSL folder, which we had created, is already there. And there's one other thing I've also gone ahead and done. On the GitHub repository that I've created, there should be a file called identity.sh. And I've gone ahead and moved this file over to my server, because if you run this, it basically makes it so that you only have to enter your GitHub passphrase once, and then for that session it will basically work throughout. Otherwise you have to keep entering in your GitHub password. So this seems to be running fine. Let me show you the exact setup that I had in the beginning of the video. So basically you run tmux, and let's create a new session called ML. So we had tmux installed, so there we go, tmux is running. So now we want to split our windows up, so I'm pressing Control and B. This is the tmux basically key that lets it know that you're trying to do a tmux command, and then so I did tmux Control B and then the percentage sign to split it up, and then I'm going to do again Control B and the double quote to make it into this horizontal split. And so over here I like to run htop, so I have stats coming in, and Control B and up arrow to switch over to the top one. So over here we can do source activate Python 3. Give it a second. And we can switch over to the other one and actually do git clone and my private GitHub repository. So I have this SSH thing, and we're going to go ahead and copy that, and it's going to ask me for the private key, and enter that, and it goes in and clones it. Great. So I have an ML folder there, and so Jupyter notebook on this one. So basically I like to have the notebook running here, htop running over here, and this one I can just do, make sure you're on the right one. On this one I can do GitHub related stuff. Let me just show you the identity.sh thing that I was, the script that I've created. So I'm going to basically create a new file called identity.sh, and I'm going to copy its contents over from the identity.sh file. Oh, not blame, we don't want to do that. Copy that and paste that in there. Great. And so make it an executable, and then run it. So I'm entering in my GitHub passphrase once, and so now if I go into the ML folder, which is basically the GitHub repository, I can touch something like or echo hi into test.txt, and then git status, git add, and commit it. Oh, looks like it didn't. Okay. Well, it pushed it. So if we go back to my repository and refresh it, we do have text.txt. It should work. And then if we also go over to the actual, yep. So the traffic is now being routed through securely, and the Jupyter notebook is running. One last thing you want to do is basically leave this, save everything that you have in the way it is, and then exit your SSH session. So we're going to press the tmux key, which is Control B and then D to detach. So now we're out. We're just on the regular SSH session. But if you want to go back, then you can just do tmux ls to list the sessions. We have one session I created called ML. To attach to it, it's tmux A followed by the one called ML, and then everything we have will still be there. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial on how to get deep learning and machine learning sort of set up, and this makes it so that you get up and running really quickly. Alright guys, thanks for watching the video. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, and on the next tutorial we'll be using Amazon's Alexa to deploy our deep learning stacks into the cloud. So make sure to subscribe and make sure to follow me on Twitter. Thank you.